If you've been following along, we now have all of the lumber cut to the proper length and width. These happen to be the center supports. We also now have our stacked dado blade inserted. It's going to cut a 1/2 inch wide kerf, and I now have to adjust its cutting depth to 3/8 of an inch thick. The reason why I need to adjust the stacked dado blade to cut a 3/8 of an inch deep kerf is because this is 3/4 inch lumber. If I cut a 3/8 of an inch deep lap joint here, which is halfway through this 3/4 inch lumber, and make another lap joint here that's 3/8 of an inch deep, when I assemble the two together, they should line up perfectly and be flush with one another. At least that's the goal. It's going to take some very careful measurement and some test pieces. To adjust the dado blade to a 3/8 of an inch deep kerf, I'll use this gauge it device, which will help me adjust the height of the blade. Once I have the blade height adjusted, I'll use a scrap piece of lumber to make some test cuts on. But before I do any adjustment on the blade, I better make sure that the lumber is 3/4 of an inch thick. If I use my dial calipers, you can see that the wood is exactly 3/4 of an inch thick. To use the gauge it saw gauge, you rest the base of the saw gauge on the table saw surface, and you rotate the blade so a tooth on the blade is at its highest position. And you rest that tooth on this surface here. Making sure you have the tooth at its highest position, you can then look at the gauge and see where you have the height of the blade set. And according to this, it's now at about 3/8 of an inch thick. Now, I don't always trust this for really fine detail work, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a test cut. Since I know this board is 3/4 of an inch thick, I'll go ahead and cut a small kerf in it, and I'll use my dial calipers just to verify that it is 3/8 of an inch deep. I can use the end of it here and insert it into the kerf and measure the depth between this point of the dial caliper and the tip. We'll wait for the blade to slow down and stop. All right, let's look at the kerf. That's nice. And now we'll measure it. We'll measure the width of the kerf. Should be 1/2 inch. Exactly 1/2 inch. I don't know if that's going to focus or not, but that's 1/2 inch. And now we'll measure the depth. Okay, the final verdict, the kerf is now exactly 3/8 of an inch deep. But just to be extra cautious, because I don't want to have to recut lumber, I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of scrap pieces of lumber here and cut a lap joint in the ends of them and see how they match up. Okay, let's assemble the two lap joints and see how they fit. What we're looking for is a joint that is perfectly flush from one face to the other. If I press down, I feel just a little bit of a ridge, but not bad at all. In fact, right here in the edge, it's perfectly flush. Here we have just a little bit of a ridge. That could just be a difference in the way the wood has been. The wood could be slightly cupped or bowed. So I am very happy with this. That looks good. Now that we have the dado blade adjusted to the proper height and width, we can start cutting our lap joints. The first lap joints I'll be cutting will be the ones in the ends of the cross supports right here. Because they'll be lapped into the sides of the 3/4 inch lumber, I have to cut the lap joint back 3/4 of an inch. Since this will be my first lap joint for those cross supports, I'm going to use a marking knife to put a little mark on the piece of wood at 3/4 of an inch. So now everything from the mark to the edge of the board can be removed with the dado blade up to it's set 3/8 of an inch deep. What I'm doing now is I'm adjusting the board in the exact location it needs to go for the 3/4 of an inch cut. And then I'm going to adjust the stop on the end of my miter fence so it doesn't cut any further into the wood than 3/4 of an inch. Now that I have the stop adjusted on the miter gauge fence, I can complete this first cut, and then I'll lift up the stop and nibble out the rest of the wood. Okay, the cut is nice and flush. And now let's see if it actually is the right. It should be exactly 3/4 of an inch or the thickness of the piece of wood, and it is. It's very good. So we'll go ahead and cut the rest of them. We have to make the same cut in the ends of all 4 of these cross braces. Okay, the cross braces are all done. They look really good. Looking at the diagram, I'd say the next dado I should cut would be the dados in the center of the dowel support pieces and the center of the feet. The feet are 32 inches long, and so are the dowel supports. So once I have the miter gauge stop set to the proper location, I can make a cut here, flip the board around, make this cut using the outside edges as a reference, and then just go through and nibble off the center part of the dado. I can do the same thing for all 4 of these boards and the 2 feet. So this is one of the boards for the feet. It's exactly the same length as the boards for the wooden dowels, 32 inches. Since I need to have a dado cut to accept the upright like this, again, this is This is the foot, this is the upright. And the upright is 3 inches. I'm going to first find the center line of this board. It's a 32-inch board, center line is 16. Okay? Now from the center line, because I want to center the 3-inch board in the middle of this, I'm just going to go back 1.5 inches here and 1.5 inches here. Because this is my sample piece, I want to make sure I make this one as accurate as possible. We'll go ahead and strike these lines. So this is a 3-inch centered space for the upright. I'm about ready to make my first test cut in the foot of the stand for the lap joint. I'm just going to put some nicks in the wood with the dado blade just to make sure things look okay, and then I'm going to flip the board end to end and make the exact same cut because I want it centered in the board, and then we'll take a measurement. As you can see, this is right on the line. This is off a little bit. It's a little bit on the inside. So if I measure from here to the line, it's off by that much. But what that really means is that I didn't have the initial line centered exactly. Could have been an issue with the thickness of the pencil, but when you flip a board end to end and you make the same cut, you know that both cuts are exactly in the same spot in the middle of the board. So I'm not too worried about this being off. I'm going to finish up the dado cuts here and here because I know that they're not on the outside of my markings. And then I'll take one of the upright pieces and I'll insert it into the joint and see if it fits. Doesn't quite fit. It's a little snug. So I'm going to readjust the fence stop to take a little more off the edges, and we'll try another test fit. Here, I'll show you my miter stop. Let's see here. There we go. So what I'm doing is I'm putting this stop down and sliding the board against it to make the cut. That's good. Just a little bit of wiggle room, but that's okay. Yep. Remember, if you make an adjustment on one side, when you flip it and cut the other side, you're doubling the amount of wood you're taking off. So here's the next foot. You notice there's a knot here. And on the plans, I have the feet tapered down at the end like that. So it starts at 4 inches at the center line, and then from the dado it goes down to 2 inches. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that when I cut this foot that I angle it down here so I can take out that knot. Now we can start cutting the center dados on all of the dowel supports. It's time to start cutting the lap joints for the upright supports. As you can see in the diagram, there's quite a few to cut. This one on the face, another one on the face here, these two for the dowel supports, 2 on the edges for these cross supports, 2 on the edges down here, and 1 more in the face down here for the feet. I've already taken the time to lay out where the lap joints will be on this first upright support. Here, here, and here are the ones for the face. This one's for the foot, and these 2 are for the dowel supports. Then on the edge of this upright, we need to take some out here and here for the cross supports, and the same thing on the other side, here and here. Now that I have one complete set of lap joints completed, let's do a test fit. Very nice. Now we'll cut the lap joint for the second dowel holder. And we'll do a test fit. Very nice. A little wide maybe, but that's not a problem. For the lap joint for the foot, I'm just going to have to eyeball where the blade cuts along this line. My fence stop doesn't extend far enough to be able to use it for this cut. Always wait for the blade to stop. That is perfect. And now we'll start making the cuts for the lap joints for the side supports. Well, that looks pretty good. Let's do a test fit. Here's one of the side supports. And that fits in there perfectly. If we put the dowel support piece here, and then the cross support piece here, it should become very stable. And now we'll cut the lap joint for the lower cross support. I now have both side support pieces done. These are the lap joints for the dowel holders. This lap joint and this one are for the cross supports, and this one is for the feet. And they're both identical.